Okay. Okay, so I'm about to hand over to Elton, and so just to say that the sort of format of this of these talks is, I mean, doesn't have to be very. The idea isn't to have a formal lecture from the podium, but really, this group wants to take on the experience and the knowledge of the people who are speaking and engage with the methods or the tools that they're presenting, and really see what we can do to bring this into practice. And so I'm very happy to welcome Elton to give this talk. Dr. Elton Barker, I'm speaking informal. And
keep informal, it's fine.
And he's really an excellent speaker to have for a number of reasons. He's obviously a very beyond disciplinary scholar, and so he has done work on he works on Homer and the representation of debate in Homer. He's written on the epic cycle in Homer. He's written guides on beginner study in Homer. Beyond that, he works in what I would characterize as scholarship on topography in the ancient world, and then that moves into questions of more digital humanity questions and how to use tools, digital tools, to represent this information and to connect it to the actual scholarship of understanding and interpreting Homer, inter alia. And he's been a major player in the Pelagios project, which is a very wide infrastructure for trying to combine data in classical scholarship, especially related to topography, as I understand, and that kind of successful creating of networks and generating of functional data producing project is something that we're very, hopefully we could someday imitate. And his talk today will be centered mostly, as I understand, on the Recogito tool, which is a tool that I think was born out of the Pelagios project, and which is a tool that's trying to enable scholarly annotation across different sort of media. So obviously, Elton can give you this information much better. So I, again, thank you for speaking today, and I pass the word to you.
Now you can see me, right?
We can, yeah, it's perfect.
Right. Well, if you remember George's very kind introduction, and many thanks for inviting me, and many thanks to you for turning out to listen to me. The only good thing that I would like to pick out from the introduction was that it really emphasizes that I'm not a technologist, and that has now just been demonstrated in my inability to get this working. And not only not a technologist, but also not an archaeologist. So the question you might be thinking is, why is this guy come along to talk to us then? What do I have to offer? And hopefully Brady has valiantly stepped in and maybe given you a brief insight into what I'm going to talk about. This is kind of where we are at the minute. This is a project I'm working on with Brady, funded by a Swedish agency. And that's trying to map places and other kinds of spatial information in Pausanias. And just from being able to map that information, that place and space information in Pausanias, interesting things and patterns emerge. Not least of all, here you have a map, certainly not of all the places that Pausanias mentions, but enough of them to give you an impression. I think this may even be just from book one, that even though Pausanias' Pelagius, this description of Greece, is very focused on the Greek mainland, in fact, he talks about the oikumeni. He talks about the Greek settlements across the Mediterranean. And we can also kind of break that down into the different books and to kind of focus on which books mention, keep focused on the Greek mainland or mention all of these other places around the oikumeni. So this is one virtue, I think, of being able to map textual information, to start drawing attention to patterns you wouldn't necessarily observe if you're just reading the narrative. Now, where do the archaeologists come in? Well, obviously, I'm a literature person, as I've said, and when I think of archaeologists, obviously I think of indie, which must irritate all of you. That's how you're seen in the kind of the common conception. But the point actually that could be interesting here is this was a meme that was being sent around a few years ago when you had the riots in Charlottesville, relating to various Confederate statues and monuments and things, and this debate and conflict taking place around the idea of fake news, disinformation, and the role actually the archaeologists, not only indie in this case, the role archaeologists can play in those information wars about accessing information. So this is information that you will be familiar with. I know it is in last week's talk as well, the FAIR Convention, essentially. How can you find and access what you want? How can you then, even if you do find it, even if you can access it, can you interoperate with it? Can you reuse it? And that's hopefully where Pelagios comes in. At least one small bit of this work is where Pelagios comes in as a way of easily linking information online, whether that information is stuff that you guys produce with archaeological reports or databases, or stuff that I do, which is working with texts, perhaps working with library collections and maps. And the way that Pelagios links this information, the way Pelagios is able to link all of these different, very heterogeneous documents on the web, is through a process called annotation. And annotation is something that goes back, to really the beginning of writing, certainly to the beginning of the book, the kind of the manuscript. And here is my world that George was flagging up in his very gracious prologue, which is Homer. This is the beginning of Homer's Iliad. The bold text there in the center of the screen is the beginning of the Iliad, and everything that you see around it, and including in between lines of Homer's text, is an annotation or a series of annotations. And interestingly, a series of annotations that often link to other kinds of information. In this case, it's linking the beginning of Homer's Iliad to other mythological traditions around the Mediterranean, including the Near East. So this is, if you like, an ancient form of linked data. So and it was able to do this, it's using this new manuscript technology to give a reader better context for their reading of Homer's poem. And that, I suggest, is what this new digital medium can do. This process of annotation can link to other kinds of information, and rather like what we're seeing here, able to hyperlink to this other information that enables us to get a better context of what we're reading on the web. So here are the three, I think, central components of Pelagios. One is that method of annotation I've just been talking about, the way that Pelagios works, the way it enables these different data sets and resources to be connected is through references to places. So here we have a place highlighted in a text, aligned to a gazetteer, and I'll come back to that in a second. The gazetteer providing, if you like, the glue to the Pelagios system. And what that looks like under the hood is this open annotation model. So this is producing linked data. So by virtue of highlighting the place reference in my document and then aligning it to this central authority file, the gazetteer, I'm able to create linked data, as well, of course, provide more interesting information about that place in the text, not least of all to be able to map it. So that's one aspect of Pelagios. The second aspect of Pelagios has been to develop tools. One of them I'm going to give you a walkthrough in a minute, as if trying to share my screen wasn't an issue enough for me. I'm going to actually try to give you a live demo, so we'll see how that works. So that's Recogito is the annotation platform, and as we emphasize here, it's annotation without the pointy brackets. Any fool can use it, and I should know because I can use it. Another tool that hasn't been developed for, and this was just essentially a beta and it's saved very much in beta production, a prototype is, okay, if Recogito, if you think of that as a way of producing linked data, how can you then consume linked data? What if stuff is connected on the web? How can you then make use of it? How can you search through it? Of course, the way that ideally linked data works, and particularly Pelagios's idea of linked data works, is decentralized. So you should be able to access information that's relevant to what you're looking at through any website that's going to mention the place that's in your document. Nevertheless, we thought it was worthwhile experimenting with some kind of visualization search platform. That was called Peripleo. You know, I'm the classicist. I come up with the name, so I'm certainly not the technologist who gets it all working. But this was just a prototype that we developed a couple of years ago that we're beginning to think about maybe resurrecting to give a sense of what a linked ancient world data might look like. So as we start talking to various other partners who are now producing linked data, whether we can have some kind of rudimentary search interface that, again, better surfaces their information, enables users to perform various queries, not just spatially as here, but also, if you notice, a kind of a timeline possibly that we could use too. And the third aspect, and perhaps the most important, and certainly it was kind of news to me that it was going to be important, and luckily so, because this has been my job, if you like, on Pelagios, and that's community, linking people. So Pelagios is as much about linking people as it is about linking data, and I want to come back to that at the end. So hopefully I don't forget to talk about this new Pelagios network. Right, here we go then with Recogito, a short walkthrough, and I just want to check that you can. Do you have any questions so far? That you can hear me okay? That you've been able to see everything? Just a thumbs up or down, indeed. Okay, good. Right, let's go on with a walkthrough. Let's see how this goes. So this is what Recogito looks like. It's at the minute, at least, and I want to come back to that too. So it's a web browser application. You don't have to download anything. It's free. It's open source. It's on GitHub. I can give you all the references at the end. Simple login. The login is really so that you are in control of your workspace. And I want to emphasize also the collaborative aspect, and that you can share documents with it. And it's also to do with, obviously, data protection. You can work on copyrighted materials in Recogito, but you can't make them public. Or if you do, it's on you. It's kind of our disclaimer. So the login helps, kind of formalize that process. But we're not keeping information on you at all. It's fully GDPR compliant in that respect. So it's a simple login. This is what it looks like, and there are two things to draw attention to. First of all, there's a My Documents. This is stuff that I've uploaded, and there's also a Shared with Me. So this is what other people have shared with me. And you're going to see a lot of Pausanias there, because that's what I've been working on, and I want to come back to Pausanias at the end. So here's my documents. I could pick any of these to kind of give you a walkthrough, but I'm going to do something very scary, and that's to upload a document. So I'm going to go to new, and I'm going to go to, I'm going to get something from the CTS service. So those of you who are not familiar with the technology, with the terminology, this is CTS service is the kind of the latest way of publishing digital text online. Canonical text service, I think is the acronym, and it's what you can do with Recogito is to upload either plain text TXT or TEI, and that was very much a demand from the community working with digital humanists, for whom TEI, the Text Encoding Initiative, is, if you like, the industry standard. So we wanted to make sure that we had an annotation platform that would be of use to them. So I'm going to the Scaife viewer here, which is a particular producer of TEI, and specifically CTS TEI. I'm going to copy the link location, go back to Recogito, paste in the link location, and it's now there. New document. It worked. Okay, let me just highlight that for a minute. A blue button appears on the right-hand side. I go to options. And this allows you to perform named entity recognition. So let me click on that just so that you get to see what it looks like. And this, again, is perhaps an interesting thing to notice, that you're the first, if you like, the default, and it certainly shouldn't be the default, but the default is a Kima NER plugin. That was actually developed by a member of the community in Pelagios. Kima refers to a Hebrew gazetteer, and they wanted an NER plugin for Hebrew, and so they developed that, and now you can access it. So an important aspect of Recogito, and again something I'm going to come back to at the end, is the idea of its plug-in ability. You can kind of plug in these different apps and different different kinds of things into it. What I'm going to do is just use the standard default, Stanford NLP, and I'm also going to check against not all of these gazetteers. This is again important to notice that there's a suite of gazetteers that we draw upon, ranging from the ancient world, which is what I'm interested in, of course, Pleiades and Dare, right through to Geonames, indeed this Hebrew gazetteer as well, and one from Latin America, all produced again by the community. But let me just keep highlighted Pleiades and Dare because I'm dealing with an ancient text. I'm going to start NER. Let's see if the system breaks. It shouldn't. It's a small file. Having just said that, talk amongst yourselves. And if we, for whatever reason, we just have the hamster wheel, I can just show you how to do it yourself. Okay, I'm bored. Let's go in to the document. In any case, what we wanted to emphasize, okay, so it's picked up a few things. An important thing to notice is this is now, we're in this kind of blue highlighted circle. That's your document view. I'm going to show you the others in due course, but this is where the annotation happens. And the important thing to notice is that it's picked up on a few what you might call named entities, place named entities specifically, but they're in gray. And the reason why they're in gray is that they've been done automatically. Recogito operates a kind of a traffic light system. So to turn this green, it needs a human eye on it. So, okay, let's have a look. So I'm clicking on a GNC. Okay, and this is actually very interesting. So this is brought in, and the reason why it's grayed out, and probably why the NER didn't work, actually, come to think of it, is I don't know how many of you are familiar with Perseus, and certainly with its kind of historical legacy. Perseus, even though the Scaife viewer is new, the Perseus texts that we see in the Scaife viewer go back probably about a decade. And at that point, Perseus was experimenting with linked data, and they were using the Getty source of place names. And that's what we're seeing here in the tag, and that's why it's appearing as gray in the Recogito screen. That things have moved on now, and that Pleiades is now the ancient is the gazetteer of the ancient world. That wasn't around at the time when Perseus was first publishing their data. So what I'm going to do is we're going to start from scratch. So I don't want that really, although I guess it's okay. It could be useful for future reference. Brady, I'm sure, will talk about this. Once you get the information out, to be able to then link to other kinds of data. So let's keep the Getty reference in there. It's not doing any harm. What I want to show you is how to link this to Pleiades. So I'm going to use a search. The GNC, the first option, it's a pretty good one. The Aegean Mare, that's what I'm reading as the Aegean Sea. Click on that. And if I press OK, it's now turned green. So it's really that simple. And if I was then to go to the RDF output, if you like, the code that I showed you in that previous screen in the PowerPoint presentation, you would see that what we basically created there was a triple. An RDF triple, where we highlighted the object in the document, related that to the target, the Pleiades gazetteer, and then produce this that semantic relationship to produce linked data. Let's start from scratch. The Greek mainland I might skip for the time being, and one thing that you will notice when you're using Recogito is it's constantly getting you to interpret, and that's really why we wanted to make sure that it emphasizes the human, that a human has read this and has made an assertion, because it's not about you're having to interpret all the time actually what the author or the particular document they're reading is trying to say. So I'm going to leave out Greek mainland because that's an open issue, what Pausanias means by Greek mainland. I'm going to go to the slightly easier Cycladic Islands. I'm going to click on place again. Notice actually something I didn't mention before. We'll look at this in a minute too. There are three options. There are three entities you can annotate. I'm going to go with place again, and it pops up automatically. It's not always as easy as this. Sometimes you have to do some searching, but it's popped up as this is a Pleiades URI. Is that the one you mean? I could put change, and I could then explore other options, but no, I'm going to confirm that. But this time I'm going to provide more information. So I'm going to add a tag. I've just put my cursor there, and a whole list of these other tags have come up, and that's because Recogito remembers the tags that have previously been used on this document. In this case, it's the tags that have been imported with a document from Perseus. Well, I'm not interested in these. I want to create my own typology. I want to create my own structured data about what this place reference might mean for me with this document. So it's free text, although there is now a structured vocabulary as well. I can talk about that maybe with questions. But and hopefully I'm going to get this right, the structured vocabulary that we're using, or the typology that we're using in the Pausanias project, is first of all we consider whether the place is part of the built environment, so part of the a human footprint on the ground. Is it a territory or region, or is it a natural feature, a physical feature? Well, Cycladic Islands, I think I can go with that being a physical feature. Although again, any island could potentially be part of the built environment. It could be a territory. You only have to think of Crete, for example, or Sicily. But I'm going to go with physical in this case. I think physical makes more sense. So I'm going to I've just type physical, hit return. I can add as many tags as I want. Just do bear in mind that the more tags you provide, of course, the more complex you're making things. So it depends on how deep you want to get into this, how thick you want your references to be. Think of all of these tags as separate columns in a CSV, a table at the end that you get out. So I'm going to go with physical, and I'm going to say it's an island. And that's probably as much as I want to say. Although something else we've been doing with the Pausanias project is try to identify where possible if Pausanias is either there or imagining his reader to be traveling through that space. And we're interested in that because we want to see where we have, if you like, this very hodological kind of route-based approach, route-based journey through the various places and objects in space that he mentions, or whether it's one of those moments where he moves back or forth through time and goes to other places where he's not imagining you there to be in the space. Here, he's possibly imagining you to be in the space. I'm going to add Pausanias, or Paus for short. Press OK, and it's turned green again. I'll do one more just so that you kind of do it a lot quicker this time. Let's go with the Attic land, or maybe Laurium. That's already been highlighted. So we go to Laurium. That's the mines. So we can go to the mine of Laurion. That looks a pretty good map. This time I'm going to maybe delete that because I'm interested in my structured information and those table columns. I want to use the same topology I've used before. Not physical this time. I reckon that's part of the built environment. This is a human footprint. I mean, obviously at some point it was physical, natural, but now you've got the human footprint on it. It's a mine. And again, he's imagining you further on. So there's a movement through space. I'm going to put Pausanias. So there you go. That's how you can mark up places. Actually, since I'm in a tutorial here, if you have any questions, do kind of break in. If there's something you didn't quite get when I was leading you through this, otherwise I'll just keep talking. Yes.
Yes,
Was there anybody?
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
The interpretation is subjective, isn't it?
That's right.
So did you just randomly say that Lavrion is a mine? Because
well, not random. What?
Not exactly random, but I mean, he says that in this geographical area, this is where the mines were. So
that's right.
He's first referring to the wider geographical spaces, and then he's putting in the built environment.
That's great. That's a really nice point, actually. And what I could have done, I think, if I go back. So let's edit this. So the other actually is quite nice too, because it shows you how Recogito works. So there's metadata here too. There's a stamp. This is Elton made this assertion, but maybe Catherine comes on and goes, no, that fool Elton, what's he talking about? Let's go back here, and what we mean is actually potentially the place. So there, the digital atlas of the Roman Empire is a little bit more ambiguous. Doesn't just mention Larion, but also doesn't mention the mine. It also mentions the place. We might think what he's talking about is actually the deme around Larion. So we can go with it, even though it doesn't mention Larion in the title here. There's a connection here because that's where Larion is connected. So maybe I'm going to go with that instead. And it's not built. I can then delete the tags. Just click on them, delete, and I'm going to do my own. So we're going to go with physical. We're going to go with maybe a deme, and again Pausanias, and then that would leave open the option from that being a physical space being turned into the built environment with this reference. That's up to you. That's to do with interpretation, and that's, if you like, in many ways the beauty of Recogito, as well. You could say the frustrations, because you're going to have to make that judgment call yourself. Okay. Hopefully that's answered your question.
Yes.
Let's keep going. Just very briefly, I want to show you that you can also identify people. I mentioned those entities before. So Ptolemy is a person. So I can mark him as a person. You get some of the same functionality. So I can add tags. I can maybe say Ptolemy, what we're talking about here is he's maybe a general, and that he's non-Athenian. These are two things I might be interested in capturing. And then something else I might be capturing, which is the Wikidata URI to Ptolemy, and maybe Brady will want to talk about that in a minute, or after I've talked. So I'm going to just put Wikidata link here, and I could just pop that in. What I can't do, and this is a discussion that's ongoing at the minute, that George is party to too, is connect this to an authority file. There's no existing authority file for people as there is for places. If there is, we could drop that, if you like, drop that into Recogito to then do that next step of not only disambiguating the various Ptolemies, and trust me, there are lots of Ptolemies in Book 1 of Pausanias, but also to create that linked data. So we're not creating linked data here. Or rather, we can kind of do a hack with linked data by providing the Wikidata link. But the Recogito interface is set up so that once, and hopefully a linked data prosopography does come online, we can kind of drop that in. So I'm going to put OK. Something else that comes up here is that Recogito asks you, well, there are 30 other Ptolemies in the text. Do you want to reapply this annotation? Now, anything that cuts down on my work, I'm going to tend to say yes to. The thing to be aware here, of course, is that Pausanias is often talking about different Ptolemies. So if you wanted to distinguish between the different Ptolemies, best not to put yes here. If you're not bothered, you can put yes. So I'm just going to put yes for the time being, and then the others would be highlighted. What you could then see is go to entity type, and it's get a different color. So the green are places, blue in this case is a person. So that's one aspect of annotation. And there's one other aspect of annotation I want to quickly show you. And that's changing from the normal annotation. So again, the blue highlight, we're in normal annotation mode where you connect, where you identify entities, character strings as entities. Let me just show you what happens by pressing relations. What do I mean by relations? Well, this is a rudimentary relational annotation tool where you can connect different entities. It only works if the entities have already been identified in the text. So if I was to try to, I want to connect Sunni onto Attica, the Attic land, I can't do that yet because they haven't been identified. What I can do is to connect the Cycladic Islands to the Aegean Sea, or Laurium for Ptolemy, whatever. Let me connect these two. So it's just a simple highlight one, drag and drop to the other. A little tag box comes up again. Again, this is free text at the minute. We're in discussions about maybe having a drop-down controlled vocabulary that would better suit various network visualization tools. You think of what the kind of the output here. Well, the tag I might use is maybe proximity, something like that. These two places are considered proximate to each other, something like that, whatever. And
are the tags predefined? I mean,
no, that's exactly what I just said. They're not predefined. You define them, but Recogito will remember the tags that you use. So the next time you come in, and let's do that, even though it's not going to be the case. Let's say the Aegean Sea is proximate to Laurium. I can start typing and Recogito remembers, you mean proximity. You might not, but if you do, you just click on yes, and there we go. So you can start building up this kind of network. Yes, Catherine?
Does it only remember what you have inserted, or has it already got a set of definitions that you might have?
No, only what you've done on this document. But it's it's technically possible for it to remember tags you've used in previous documents that just hasn't been, it requires some development that hasn't taken place. It also, and I mentioned this just in passing before, you could also import a controlled vocabulary where you can't at the minute, but this would require probably a day and a half development. And then you could import a controlled vocabulary, maybe for those who know about these things, I'm not saying I do, but the Scots vocabulary, for example, you could import. So then you'd have this pre-defined set of terms. This is particularly useful potentially for if you're doing a typology for art objects, for example, and particularly useful, I can imagine, for archaeologists. Since I'm a textual person, I haven't really had to worry about this, and really Recogito came from that world, actually, the world of the text. Let me briefly show you what the map view now looks like. So obviously there's not much to see, but instantly, okay, maybe that's because these are automatic identifications. Let me click on some of these, and there we go. What's good about this is you can click on any of these places that you see, either polygons for regions or dots as places, and you can bring up the text, and it says there are 26, one of 26 annotations of this ancient Egypt region, and I can just jump to the text to see where that is, and we get the. So notice here, automatic match, kind of an alert. This is what the computer has said. Do you mean that? So none of these have been looked at, but it gives you a sense of hopefully the helpful automated NER that's in Recogito. So then you can confirm. If I confirm, actually, that's okay, and it's going to say there are all these other annotated versions of Egypt. Now, if I do yes. That's now been verified by a human. Other things you might want to think about are metadata. So in the minute, this is just the new document where you'd want the title, maybe you want the license. That's where you would have to say, if I was to say this is CC0, okay, then I can start sharing that information with anybody. Or I could share with anybody with a link. And I can also enable people to work on this document as well. So it's not just me working on it, but I can share this document with other users of Recogito. Just a reminder, the annotation preferences are that suite of gazetteers that we looked at before. There's something else I might want to talk about at the end. George, how long do you want me to talk for? Since I'm in a kind of a live demo. Yeah, I can keep talking, or what would be best for people?
Well, we have a hard break at noon, so we should at least leave 5 minutes for discussion, I imagine. But if you know.
What time are we now?
We're 11:50. We've got 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Well, okay, so there are many other things I could have talked about, including uploading a map. So it's also, you can upload images. So you can, rather in the same process as I was, in fact, if I just show you what that looks like, I won't do it now, but if I just show you, go to...
I think just to say, I mean, don't feel pressured to finish in 5 minutes, because if we go all to time and there's no time for discussion now, we can always come back next meeting. So
sure, okay, just show you.
Yeah, just show what you.
I understood. So this is the image. So I could then start annotating an image as I was just annotating yeah, let me show you. In fact, I'm going to do a link box around Africa. The only difference being that you transcribe what you see, because obviously we're dealing with a map, not a text. So you have to, first of all, do the transcription, and then Recogito will try to align to that transcription. And geonames is good enough, I'd say, for this instance. So it's exactly the same process that you just saw before, only this time with a map. But what I want to finish with is, yeah, let's go to here. Recogito is an annotation platform, so it really should be seen as part of your workflow, part of the pipeline, if you like. So it's really great for capturing information, annotating an information. If you want to do visualization or analysis, you get the information out into other systems. So and we looked at the relations before, you know, identifying relations between different entities. So you can export this into, you know, straight into a Gephi, for example. If you're interested in visualizing this into a GIS, you've got, you know, either CSV or the GeoJSON. Both the RDF and the GeoJSON also linked data formats. So if you want to produce linked data, and there's also, if you want to create an edition or enrich an edition, there's also a TEI XML format as well that you can export out. So really as many different formats as possible, right down to the most bog standard of all the CSV, so by which you can pretty much do anything. Next steps, if you like. So at the minute, and Brady will hopefully have talked about this already, I'm on a project that's trying to identify places and objects in space in Pausanias. And we're doing that with a bit of a hack at the minute, because the issue for us, one of the critical challenges of trying to identify places in Pausanias is that Pausanias gives us much more granular information than normal gazetteers allow for. So Pelagios will mention this range of places across the Mediterranean from 750 BCE through to about 450 CE. And it might mention 2 or 3, perhaps if you're lucky, 4 places within a particular settlement. So with Athens, for example, it might mention the Acropolis or the Kerameikos, maybe even your temple, but really not much more information than that. Yet Pausanias gives you this really thick description of these places on mainland Greece, and especially Athens. So how have I managed to create all of these dots here? It's because we're doing a bit of a hack, and we've kind of combined databases that have got object in space information, one of which is Judith Binder's Art Historical Gazetteer, one of which is Brady's Topos Text, one of which is a German archaeological Arachne database. And we're using those as gazetteers. Now, of course, they're not proper gazetteers in the sense that they're not built as gazetteers. They're, you know, databases with objects in. but we're using them as gazetteers for our purpose of linking Pausanias to the objects that he's describing or the places he's describing, because that's useful for us. And we're able to do that because we're hosting our own version of Recogito on a server. So we're not interfering, if you like, with the kind of global Recogito and its suite of gazetteers. What we want, and this is an appeal to you guys specifically, is for there to be an Athens gazetteer that we can connect to and to which all these other databases also connect to. That's what we need for producing proper linked data for the material that we have. Two other things I think it's two other things I want to mention. First of all, Pelagios is no longer a project. That is to say, it's not a core team anymore, funded by a particular funding strand. It's an open community, what we call a network. So the Pelagios network is a formal association of partners. Those partners are equal and interdependent. Each one has an equal voice. Each one can coordinate one of these activities, which kind of the Pelagios network is split into. All we have to do to become a partner is to sign an agreed work document, a kind of a work plan. I want to do this. Basically, it should be what you want to do anyway. I want to do this. That fits. That work plan fits with the manifestos, if you like, of this particular activity. That document we're calling a Memorandum of Understanding. It's an agreement between the Pelagios network and the partner. When both parties sign that, after maybe some discussion, you then become a partner of the network and you can take a say in future development. You can share your best practice, your tools, you might pool resources. It's a way of trying to get stuff happening and a way of enabling this shared space to continue, and the shared space not only for ideas and best practice, but also for tools and maybe a more formal space for collaboration without any specific funding attached to it. So it's trying to address that critical issue of digital humanities, which is what happens when the money tap for that particular grant is turned off. This is about sustainability of practice, of tools of the community. So do sign up if and when you can. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is really kind of the next steps, which the Pelagios network is very much part of. That is developing a series of case studies with the GLAMs, so they're the galleries, libraries, archives, and museums, and moving beyond academia to those folks who've got rich data about the ancient world, and not just the ancient world. And also archaeologists. You might notice here the Archaeological Data Service and Saving European Archaeology from the Digital Dark Ages. So that's also the Ariadne folks who were talking last week. They're interested in what Pelagios might have to offer. On that note, potential future development, perhaps exciting or interesting for you guys, would be the idea of Recogito not being this kind of monolith that enables you to do text or image annotation, but something that's much more modular, something that you can adapt to your needs. You can drop into a website, you can drop into a database to be able to do the same kind of annotation that I've just shown you, but without necessarily working with that platform that I showed you. So something much more flexible according to your needs. And then really an advertisement, and that is this all requires work. So you obviously you've got your working group. There's also a conference that's taking place at the beginning of December. This would normally be face-to-face. For obvious reasons, it's not this year, but we want to take full advantage of the opportunity of working on an online space where maybe stuff can happen asynchronously as well as synchronously. So we've got a 2-week period now where folks who are interested, anybody interested in any aspect of linked data or historical linked data, whether as an academic, as an archaeologist, as someone from the GLAM community, can come together to work on stuff with folks around the world. Here are some partners of the Pelagios network, just mentioned in brief, and a whole bunch of hopefully useful resources, any of which I'm happy to talk about either in the no time remaining now or in future weeks. I will stop sharing my screen. Thank you for attention, and sorry for the technical issues, as we should always have to say at the beginning of this talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that was a really good, thank you. It was an excellent talk. I probably would have time for like one question, and then we should just pick up the discussion again next week. I think there's plenty to talk about, but I don't know if anybody wants to pose a burning question before we sign off.
I think not.
I have lots of questions that I'm happy to have seen Recogito in full action. It's quite interesting. Looks like a very powerful tool with a lot of possibilities.
I think the one thing I just want to draw attention to is where it might be going next. So I gave you a couple of links there, which you can find just with a Google search on GitHub. So if you look for GitHub Recogito, and then either Anatorius or Recogito JS. Actually, let me drop them into the chat. This is where future development's going. Bear with me a sec. Just put them in the chat for you.
Yeah, and while you're dropping it in there, I mean, I think the kind of, it'd be interesting when we have some spare moment to keep on with this conversation and think particularly about different applications that it might have in the archaeological context, which I think intuitively things come to mind, but sort of brainstorming about it might bring out other thoughts.
And if, like Catherine, you have a really great database that's got lots of interesting place information, you basically can create a little gazetteer from that. And I've dropped in again the chat the gazetteer interconnection format, which is called linked places. So that's if you like the emerging standard for linking places on the web. Which Rainer, Pelagios' developer, has worked on with Carl Grossman of the World Historical Gazetteer Project. And the last thing I'm going to drop in is something called linked traces, which is an emerging specification. So Pelagios linked data is published according to the web annotation format, which is, again, the standard. What we're imagining, though, is something a little bit richer, which can connect potentially not just textual information, but also objects, etc. So this is potentially a specific, it still needs to be specified, but that's the beginnings of a specification, the linked traces format. So if you have any interest in this at all, drop me a line and we can continue the conversation.